Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're starting a brand new fanfic. Which is What If Kurotsuchi Political Marriage with Naruto in Konoha, Part 1. If you enjoy this story, please like the video, subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you want a Part 2. Now, let's begin the fanfic. Somewhere in the land of lightning. Hey old pervert, wait up! Yelled Naruto as he called out to his sensei. Uzumaki Naruto was a boy of 15 years of age. He had blue eyes with spiky blonde hair and 3 whisker marks on each cheek, wore a black and orange jumpsuit with a konoha headband protector on his forehead. And right now was in a poor mood because of his old sensei. Said sensei was Jiraiya of the Sannin. Jiraiya was a tall man with spiky white hair tied in a ponytail that reached to his waist, and had red lines that ran down from his eyes. He wore a green kimono that was covered by a red haori. He also used a forehead protector, but unlike his young apprentice, his forehead protector had the kanji for oil, instead of the leaf symbol from Konoha like it was traditionally used by their shinobi. I told you to keep quiet, you brat. And hurry up, we don't want to stay in the land of lightning for long, said the sage to his impatient companion, not slowing his pace despite the boy's protests. And would you at least tell me why are we here in the first place? You just left me alone like you always do to go around doing your research, and next thing I know you come back and tell me we need to go at once without explanation. The blonde had an exasperated scowl on his face as he tried to keep up with his teacher's hasty pace. And the only thing you told me was to shut up while we were in these lands. What is your deal, old man? Continued to pester the blonde. Jiraiya, now as equally annoyed as his student, gave a frustrated sigh. I told you to be quiet so we can pass through this region as discreetly as possible. But fine, since you won't do that anyway, I suppose I can tell you now. Seeing as Naruto had at least calmed enough to pay attention, he started explaining. I just got a new piece of information from my spy network that could be useful and we need to address it as soon as possible, explained the Sannin as patiently as he could, which at the current moment wasn't much. So, you mean when you leave me alone you actually do something else besides preying on poor unsuspecting girls to take notes for your dirty books? Naruto's look of surprised skepticism just served to rile Jiraiya up. Of course I do. I take my job as Konoha's spymaster very seriously. Naruto still looked unconvinced, however. This little expedition of ours is for your benefit, you ungrateful brat, explained Jiraiya with indignation. Now that seemed to strike a chord with Naruto, and in an instant, his impatience was replaced with excitement and curiosity. Really? And what would that be? Arrow Sennin. A new jutsu. A new training method. The boy was almost bouncing on his heels at the prospect of learning a new technique. Something like that. I just got word from a trustworthy source of something that could boost your training. Did you know that the Hachibi Jinchuriki from Kumo has complete control over his Biju? Then the sage glanced at Naruto to see how the boy responded. The information left Naruto speechless and wide-eyed for a moment. Complete control of a Biju. Was that even possible? He could control up to 3 tails while barely keeping his sanity. For Naruto, full control of a Biju was something that seemed so out of reach. If Kumo's Jinchuriki could do that, he ought to be a truly formidable shinobi. Jiraiya, on his part, found Naruto's reaction to be amusing. Yeah, amazing isn't it? And my source told me that, apparently, the Hachibi Jinchuriki learned to master his Biju in a secluded island somewhere in the land of lightning. It seems that whatever is on that island was a key factor in learning to use the Hachibi. Naruto was in complete awe at the news. Could a secret method for controlling Biju truly exist? He didn't know what to think of it, it seemed too good to be true. However, it also filled him with hope. If he managed to control that kind of power, his dreams and goals could be within his reach. He could protect his precious people, he could have enough power to become Hokage, and he could take back Sasuke from Orochimaru's grasp. Do you really think I can do it, Arrow Sennin? Said Naruto with doubt, but more than that, he was afraid. The last time he attempted to control more than 3 tails of the Kyuubi's chakra, he almost ended up killing Jiraiya. It's worth checking out, kid. If it helps you to control even one more tail, it would still be worth it. Jiraiya's urgency, however, was that he was worried about Naruto's well-being. While he could say that the boy had improved amazingly in skill since he started his training trip, he was still nowhere near close to the strength he needed to take on a member of Akatsuki. They were strong. Having monsters such as Uchiha Itachi and Hoshigaki Kisame was a testament to that. If the rest of their members were even close to the power of those two, then they truly were fearsome. But the most worrying thing on his mind was that Kumo's Jinchuriki had complete control over his Biju and they still were planning on taking him on. Jiraiya himself couldn't think of a more dangerous thing than a fully realized Jinchuriki, and the Akatsuki were confident enough in the power of its members to hunt such a beast of a shinobi. If those were the kind of foes that Naruto was up against, then the boy simply had no hope of coming on top, not at his current level. He needed to find a way for Naruto to get strong fast, and he needed it now. He had considered trying to teach the boy Sage Mode, but he didn't know how long it would take. Typically, completely mastering Sage Mode took years, and it didn't warrant that you would be adept at it. If he spent that time teaching Sage Mode to Naruto and the boy didn't master it, then all that time would have been a waste, and that was a time that could have been better spent trying to make him stronger to face the Akatsuki before they made their move. With Naruto pondering on his ability to control the Kyuubi, and with Jiraiya full of worry for his apprentice and godson, the walk quickly went silent. Naruto, noting the downed atmosphere that his teacher was expelling, raised an eyebrow and couldn't help but feel curious and confused for his master's strange behavior. What's up with the old perv all of a sudden? Jiraiya soon realized that his gloomy demeanor was starting to make Naruto suspicious, so he promptly changed topics. Anyway, we should make haste and get out of the land of lightning as soon as possible. Well, at least it's land. We have to look for a boat to start searching for that island. Even if the adjacent sea is still technically part of the land of lightning, Kumo doesn't keep as many close tabs on its sea like they do on its land. All this caution further confused Naruto. But Ero Sennin, I thought we were neutral with Kumo. We are, but that doesn't mean that there isn't tension between the villages. Remember, kid, neutral just means that we aren't actively trying to rip each other's throats, it doesn't mean that we are friends. Explained the sage. Naruto just squinted his eyes and put his hands behind his head. It's just so stupid, Ero Sennin, to be always so hostile with each other for things that happened long ago, it just seems so petty. A peaceful future is a much better thing to aim for than keep an old conflict going, Dadbeo. Jiraiya responded by exhaling a long breath and putting on a hopeful expression. If only it were that easy, kid. People won't forget past wrongdoings just like that, and a lot of times they are in their right to feel that way. Remember your little Hyuga friend? That question seemed to surprise Naruto. Hinata. Yeah, what of her? He wondered what did Hinata even have to do with the current topic. Well, did you know that Kumo attempted to kidnap her when she was still a small child? Asked Jiraiya with an edge in his voice, somewhat angry at remembering that event. And your mother Kushina too, but I can't tell you that, thought the man grimly. Well, now that you mention it, I think Neji said something about it during our match in the Chunin exams, said Naruto, remembering the bitterness that the prodigy showed by the tragedy that event caused. But he still wondered what did that have to do with anything right now. But why are you asking, Ero Sennin? The Sannin responded without even looking back. Before I tell you that, I want you to answer me this first. Why do you think Kumo wanted Hinata for? Naruto once again squinted his eyes in focus, trying to think of any reason why anyone would have something against a shy girl like Hinata, and when she was a child no less. For her eyes, I think. He barely recalled the reason that Neji had mentioned in the exams. The prodigy mostly explained his father's death and not much of anything else. Jiraiya nodded, glad that his student knew at least that much. The Byakugan is one of the three great Dujutsu. Many would do anything to get their hands on such a powerful Kekkei Genkai. And what would have they done to her, Ero Sennin? Raise her as one of their own? Inquired the blonde. Naruto knew Hinata and considered her one of his precious people, and he had a strong conviction that she would never leave Konoha, not even if they tried to convert her since childhood. However, Naruto failed to pick on the real meaning of the attempted kidnapping. Naruto, you are a good kid and you have a good nature, but that also makes you naive, thought Jiraiya with a bit of sadness, as he knew that most likely in the immediate future Naruto would face hardships that will probably crush his good-natured spirit. If it didn't, he could die in the face of the challenges that awaited him. Kid, being forced into loyalty to Kumo would have been the absolute best-case scenario for the poor girl had the abduction been successful. Naruto raised an eyebrow in bewilderment. That was a best-case scenario. They could have taken her eyes and transplanted them into their own ninja. But what would most likely have happened is for her to become a breeding stock for life, and they would have still taken her eyes while at it, explained Jiraiya darkly, driving home just how terrible her fate could have been. Naruto widened his eyes with horror and repulsion at the thought of something so horrible happening to one of his close friends. He finally understood the implications of the abduction. She would have been forced on birthing children for a rival village for the rest of her life. And those same children could have been used against her own home. Naruto literally couldn't think of a fate worse than that. Jiraiya, for his part, just kept walking, letting all that sink in into Naruto. After a moment, he started talking again, deciding to reveal the point of his questions. I'm telling you this so you can get an example of why it's so hard for ninja nations to get along. That attempt on your friend was thwarted, but there are countless other terrible things done between ninja villages that never are. Kumo isn't even the village that we have the worst relationship with. This topic of conversation put Naruto in a depressed mood, but he was still compelled to ask. Then which one is? That would be Iwa, and by far. In the last war, there was too much bloodshed on both sides, the scars are still too fresh for it to be any other way. But as you know, we won the war, so they are the ones that suffered the most casualties. To this very day, most Iwa shinobi would rather cut off their hand than shake it with a Konoha shinobi. Finally, Naruto kept quiet, his down mood not leaving any more wish in him to keep talking. While Jiraiya was glad that Naruto finally decided to be silent in their walk through Lightning Country, he felt a bit guilty for making the normally cheerful boy so somber. I'm sorry kid, but those are the sort of things we must deal with in our ninja world. You have inherited my wish to look for a way of achieving peace between our nations, but you will have your work cut out for you. Still is important that you keep these kinds of things in mind. That was Jiraiya's last thought as they were arriving at a clearing to start preparing camp, as the evening was upon them. Neither Jiraiya or Naruto realized that in one of the trees in the proximity, just out of sight, a Venus flytrap-like figure emerged from it, seemingly separating from it as if they had been one being. The flytrap-like extension opened to reveal a head with green hair and a face with a white half, while the other half was black. The flytrap-like man was wearing a black cloak with red clouds. So it seems that the Kyuubi and Jiraiya of the Sannin are in Kumo looking for a better way to control the Biju's power, said White Zetsu with a carefree and mischievous attitude, but also full of malice. We should inform Tobi of this development. This time, Black Zetsu was the one who spoke, but unlike his white counterpart, he sounded much more serious and eerie. After that, Zetsu just sank again into the tree trunk until it left no sign that he had ever been there in the first place. A tall man wearing a black cloak with red clouds sat on a rock in a damp, dark cave. The dim light of the night sky filtering through the entrance barely made it possible to see the man's outline. The strange man had short spiky black hair, and his face was covered by an orange mask with a spiral pattern that only left a hole for his right eye. He had his arm resting on his knee as he patiently waited for Zetsu to finish his briefing on the new intel regarding the Kyuubi. And that concludes my report, finished Black Zetsu dutifully. The man just kept silent, thinking over this new bit of information. What should we do about this, Toby? This could be a good chance to snatch the Kyuubi, even if it is a bit early, said White Zetsu with a toothy grin, restless for a plan of action. Toby could see what Zetsu was getting at. In all these years that Jiraiya took over Naruto's training, the man had been extremely cautious. Never stranding too far from his allies in the Land of Fire, should an attempt on the Kyuubi be made. Adding the fact that Jiraiya was one of the strongest shinobi alive, it was a situation that made it very unlikely for the Akatsuki to go after the Kyuubi prematurely for one reason or another. For Jiraiya to suddenly relinquish his until now overly cautious behavior meant that he either strongly believed in this new method of controlling the Kyuubi, or he was getting desperate in that particular endeavor that he would take the chance with anything half decent that he could get to improve his odds. It was probably the latter if Jiraiya's hasty attitude was any indication. Indeed, going for the Kyuubi right now would be the most logical course of action, however. Zetsu's white half raised an eyebrow in curiosity at Toba's hesitation. Capturing the Kyuubi at the moment was the logical step to take, for Zetsu at least. Zetsu, did you check on that other task I commended to you? Whatever Zetsu was expecting Toby to say, it wasn't that. Well, inquired Toby once more, expectant for the plant-like man to continue. Black Zetsu was the first to compose himself. We did. Is just as you suspected. Ever since Kumo's perfect Jinchuriki became public knowledge, the other nations have started to keep a closer watch on their Biju. They don't want to be left behind in the development of their Jinchuriki. As a consequence, the security for them has been exponentially increased. Black Zetsu finished and left his white half to elaborate. Most of them aren't a problem, however, the Yonbi and the Gobi are going to be an issue. It was just as Toby had predicted. Even if the villages were tightening the security around their Jinchuriki, only those two presented a problem. The Ikibi was the case cage. He was always going to be under Suna's full protection anyway regardless of what the other nations were doing. But Suna was the weakest of the 5 great ninja nations. Even with all their security, the only real threat was the Ikibi himself, and Akatsuki could handle him. The Nibi and the Hachibi weren't nearly as closely watched, as Kumo was arrogant in their current position of having a fully realized Jinchuriki to feel as if they were invincible. They could attack while they were careless and capture them both and quickly escape before Kumo had any chance to retaliate. The Sanbi's current whereabouts were unknown to Kiri, and their only remaining Jinchuriki defected, preferring to live in solitude as a missing nin. Taki was attempting to protect the Nanabi, but they were a minor village and pathetically weak to boot. A single Akatsuki member would be enough to wipe out the entirety of Taki without even breaking a sweat, even with their hero's water. However, the Yonbi and the Gobi were a different matter. Iwa had them under tight watch, and Iwagakure wasn't weak like Suna and Taki. Unlike Kiri, they still had both their Jinchuriki, and they weren't being careless in their confidence like Kumo. Even getting close to either of the Jinchuriki would quickly bring the whole of Iwa's might on them. Even the Akatsuki would have trouble fighting 2 seasoned Jinchuriki supported with an entire powerful ninja village that had the most experienced kage in all the elemental nations all at the same time. The most effective way of handling that situation was to find a way to isolate each Jinchuriki and cut off the chance of them getting help from their village or fellow Jinchuriki. Even if the Kyuubi was an easy pick right now, Toby first wanted to think over the entire situation before making a move. Zetsu felt like he had been waiting forever with how long Toby had been quiet, at least the white half did. What are you scheming, Toby? Don't keep me in the dark here, thought White Zetsu impatiently. Black Zetsu was as calm as usual, seemingly not bothered at all by the long wait. After taking his time, Toby spoke at last. Zetsu, tell Nagato to arrange a members' meeting. We need to have everyone on this. Oh, So you do have a plan, Toby, said White Zetsu, excited and relieved at the same time for finally being done waiting. Indeed. I may have a way for one situation to deal with the other, and with that, the masked man disappeared by being absorbed in a spiral space distortion coming from his right eye. Knowing that was his cue to leave, Zetsu sank into the ground, leaving the damp cave empty. Iwagakure no Sato. Iwagakure no Sato was a village made of stone, surrounded by a mountain range and waterfalls. The buildings were carved out from the very same mountains of the region, making them like towers, and due to its hill-like structures, the paths between them had to be connected with bridges. The village had business of all kinds, with civilians and ninja going on about their daily routine. As one of the great 5 ninja villages, it was a sight to behold. And currently, their leader the Tsuchikage was eating in a small barbecue restaurant celebrating with his son, Kitsuchi, his bodyguard and family friend, Akatsuchi, and finally his granddaughter, Kurotsuchi. Akatsuchi, try to leave some barbecue for the rest of us. Even I may not be able to pay for all the food you eat, said the ruler of Iwa. Onoki was a very short old man. He had a long beard that reached to his chest and an almost as equally long mustache. Due to his age, his white hair only covered the lower half of his head, which he kept in a topknot, and had a red round nose. He wore a green flak jacket covered by a green coat with yellow borders. I'm sorry Tsuchikage-sama, I'm just making the most out of this. Is not every day that you offer to pay for everyone's meal, said the voracious boy. Akatsuchi was a large plump young man, had small black eyes, a large round nose and seemed to have a perpetually happy-go-looking face. He was wearing the standard Iowa uniform, which consisted of red clothes covered by a brown flak jacket, but he also wore a red bandana over his head that had the metal plate of a forehead protector, and he kept a yellow scarf wrapped around his neck. Well, this is a special occasion after all. Kurotsuchi has been waiting a long time for her Junin promotion. Kitsuchi was a tall man, he had dark eyes, a big nose and graying hair and a beard. He was also wearing the standard red uniform of Iowa with brown flak jacket, and like Akatsuchi, over his head he also wore a red bandana with Iowa's forehead protector insignia. Took you long enough to promote me, Gramps. You know damn well I'm one of the best shinobi in the village, said Kurotsuchi smugly. She was a young woman of 17, almost 18 years of age. She was wearing the standard red Iowa uniform with brown flak jacket and forehead protector. However, her right sleeve was missing, and wore black gloves on her hands. She also had a red skirt that showed her fishnet-covered legs. She had pale skin and short black hair framing her face, but her most notable feature was her pupil-less pink eyes. Your head is hard as stone and your ego is too big for your own good. I first wanted to make sure that your judgment was fit for a Junin, said Onoki in a matter-of-fact manner. While it was true that she was one of their most skilled ninjas, and probably their best kunoichi, and at only 17 years of age at that, she could be very overconfident, brash, and a bit immature at times, but there was no denying that she was a prodigy. There were even talks among the populace that she was well on her way to be the best option for Tsuchikage once Onoki retired. Kurotsuchi just dismissed her grandfather's claim, waving her hand with a carefree smile. Yeah, just you wait, old man, I'm gonna take your job before you know it. I'm just getting started by becoming Junin. In fact, I bet I could beat most Junin in Iowa. You just proved his point, Kurotsuchi, thought Akatsuchi with a sweat drop on his head and a deadpan expression. Onoki huffed in indignation at Kurotsuchi's careless attitude. That's exactly why I didn't want to promote you just yet. If you keep acting like that you will never be Tsuchikage. Though, you can't deny Pops, that Kurotsuchi is strong for her age. If her skills keep growing at the rate they have been, before long she just might become our best candidate for Tsuchikage, remarked Kitsuchi. Not you too, Kitsuchi. Don't go encouraging her behavior, said Onoki, exasperated at his son. Akatsuchi just laughed at their antics and Kurotsuchi soon joined him. Anyway, we are here to celebrate, and I would like to make a toast for Kurotsuchi's progress, said Kitsuchi, now standing up. May she continue making us an Iwagakure proud, he said while lifting his cup. For Kurotsuchi. For Kurotsuchi, echoed Akatsuchi and Onoki. And even some of the other clients joined in, also proud of the Tsuchikage's honorable granddaughter. Later that day, Kurotsuchi sat on her bed as the late afternoon sunlight came through her window. She had a sad look in her eyes while she looked at a picture frame in her hands. The picture was that of a woman that looked strikingly similar to Kurotsuchi. In fact, if it hadn't been for her long hair and her more mature look, she could have been a carbon copy of Kurotsuchi. In the picture, she had a serene but joyful smile while she gazed at a small bundle in her arms that could only be a baby. The tomboy just kept stroking her fingers on the borders of the frame, wondering what would her mother say if she could see how far she had come in her shinobi career. I got promoted, Mom. Junin, just the same as you, she sorrowfully tough with a sad smile as she kept staring longingly at the image of her mother. Wherever you are, I hope you are watching me. On my honor, I swear I'll make you proud, thought the girl with sadness. She always knew you were going to be a splendid kunoichi. Kitsuchi's words momentarily startled Kurotsuchi. She had been so immersed in her thoughts that she failed to notice her father in the doorway. Dad, I didn't know you were there. I was just flustered. She quickly put the photograph on her nightstand. She hated when others saw her moments of vulnerability, even if it was her dad. There is no need to feel embarrassed. Missing the people important to you is not a weakness. I myself think about her every day, said Kitsuchi with a faraway look in his eyes while he leaned on the wall. Kurotsuchi didn't know if missed was the right word to use. To miss someone, you had to remember the person. She had been too young, barely a year old, when her mother died, that she couldn't recall her. If it weren't for her photograph, she wouldn't even know what she looked like. Her mother was just finishing her maternity leave when she went back to fighting on the front lines. After that, it wasn't long until the war reached its culminating point and she went with the intent of fighting for a better future for her newborn daughter, only to be slaughtered by Konoha's yellow flash. Her mom had always been the missing element for the true family that Kurotsuchi never had. She loved her father and grandfather, but her grandpa was the Tsuchikage and didn't have much time for them. Meanwhile, her father had his hands full doing his duty as a shinobi and trying his best to raise his daughter properly by himself. And considering her only friend was Akatsuchi, she was essentially raised among men, which was probably the reason for her tomboyish attitude. And even tough, she liked the way she was just fine and wouldn't change her personality for anything. The fact still stood that she always longed for a mother figure in her life. She debated a bit before asking, Dad, how was my mom? Was she as great as everyone says she was? Said Kurotsuchi with a melancholy that was rare in the normally brash and carefree girl. Kitsuchi adopted a tender look as he looked at the sky through her window, reminiscing of times long past. No, she was better. She was the most amazing woman I've ever met. Also the most beautiful. In fact, in that department you take completely after her. Thank God for that, said Kitsuchi with a small smile, to which Kurotsuchi replied with one of her own. She was calm and collected, but also kind, loving and nurturing. She was a true lady, said the man. Well, I definitely didn't inherit any of that, replied his daughter with a forced laugh. Kitsuchi glanced at the girl appreciatively. You are both great in your own right, Kurotsuchi. And I know that she would be very proud of the woman you have become and the one you have yet to become. She wanted nothing more than to watch you grow up, and loved you with all her heart. Kurotsuchi's eyes were moist at her father's words. Even tough, it was not the first time she asked for details of her mother. She liked to ask once in a while to avoid forgetting about her memory, as it was all that was left of her. Damn Konoha for what they did. And damn the yellow flash for taking away her mother and with her the family that never was. Iwa should make Konoha pay for their sins, Dad. We are strong, we could crush Konoha. The yellow flash is not there anymore to save them this time. We should make them feel the same suffering that we do. Blood should be repaid in blood, said the girl darkly with a fierce look in her eyes. The cold rage in Kurotsuchi's pink eyes made Kitsuchi feel uncomfortable. He gave her a disapproving look and tried to reason with her. We have talked about this before, Kurotsuchi. Konoha also lost a lot of people in the war. The damage both nations sustained was so great that I'm just glad we are still standing at all. The young woman's anger just grew at her father's words. How can you leave them off the hook after all they did to us, Dad? Thought the girl in repressed rage. How can you forgive them so easily? Are you fine just leaving everything like this? Maybe you didn't care about Mom as much as you. The strength of the slap that interrupted Kurotsuchi was enough for it to be heard in the whole house. She lifted a gloved hand to her reddening cheek as she looked at her dad with a shocked expression. How dare you talk to your own father like that? I miss her like you can't even imagine. She was the love of my life. But it's precisely because I loved her that I know the pain of loss, and I would never wish to put our people through the horrors of war again. Kitsuchi was all but shouting. The rage in Kurotsuchi was so strong now that she finally snapped at him. You and Gramps are just cowards. If I ever become Tsuchikage, I will do what we should have done a long time ago and give Konoha what it deserves. Instead of hitting her again like Kurotsuchi expected, Kitsuchi just stared at her with the biggest look of disappointment he had ever given to her. Maybe Dad is right. With that attitude, you don't deserve to be Tsuchikage. And with that, Kitsuchi just turned and walked out of her room, leaving Kurotsuchi alone and seething with anger. Fine. You can keep being Konoha's bitch for all I care. She then took a step forward and smashed the door shut as soon as her father left, before throwing herself at her bed and buried her face in her pillow, staining it with wrath-induced tears. Just you wait, I'll become Tsuchikage one day and I will burn Konoha to the ground. The Tsuchikage's office. Onoki had had a long day, but he was finally wrapping up the last stacks of paperwork. He was finishing later than usual, as his little get-together with his family put him behind in his work. He was about to call it a day when he got a knock on his door. He groaned at his rotten luck. Was a little rest too much to ask? He gave permission to enter and through the door, stepped in one of his anbu, his porcelain mask of an animal signaling him as such. Speak, Hawk. It's been a long day, so out with it, demanded the tired old man. The Anbu got on one knee and lowered his head as a sign of respect to his leader. Forgive my late intrusion, Tsuchikage-sama, but I have urgent news for your ears only. Onoki raised an eyebrow in curiosity at that. Is that so? And what would this urgent news be, if I might ask? Our spies reported that Jiraiya of the Sannin is heading deep into the land of lightning along with his pupil, reported the Anbu in a monotone voice. The Tsuchikage looked unimpressed and at the border of exasperation. I fail to see what is so urgent about it. I don't care what Jiraiya does, and he is in the land of lightning, let Kumo deal with it. It's not our problem. What is important to note is his apprentice. He is training the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, continued the Anbu. Now, that got Onoki's attention. The Kyuubi, you say? I see, thought Onoki, understanding what it meant. It was a biju for the taking. If they captured the Jinchuriki, extracted his biju and sealed it in one of their own ninja, they would not only reduce Konoha's military might, but Iowa would become the only village in all the elemental nations to have 3 biju. Even Kumo would have to be wary of them, perfect Jinchuriki or not. It was a golden opportunity and the idea was appealing, however. I see where you are coming from. But he is being guarded by Jiraiya of the Sannin, and he is no pushover. The amount of men we risk by sending them against Jiraiya is too high. And that is without taking into account that we would be trespassing into Kumo's territory. Should we fail, we risk starting a war with 2 other nations while throwing away military assets, explained Onoki. There is another detail and is perhaps the most important. Our spies have managed to find out that the boy not only is the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, but also the only child of Konoha's Yellow Flash himself, continued the Anbu in the same even voice. The Tsuchikage's eyes bulged out of his head at the news and got up on his chair with a single jump. What did you say? The Yellow Flash's son? Are you sure about this? Asked the old man with urgency. The Anbu stood up and pulled an envelope out of his flak jacket and handed it to him. That is a picture of the boy, the resemblance is uncanny. The Tsuchikage hastily grabbed the envelope and pulled out the photograph. He stared wide-eyed and agape at what he was seeing. Is like seeing a ghost. He is practically identical to the Yellow Flash. If that wasn't enough, we also found out that he was born 15 years ago, on October 10th. The same day the Kyuubi attacked Konoha. Now Onoki had no doubt in his mind that he was the Yellow Flash's son. Jinchuriki were typically picked from the Kage's family to more easily ensure their loyalty. What a better host than the Yellow Flash's newborn child. Do you know anything about the boy's abilities? It is to our knowledge that he possesses the summoning contract with the Toads, and already mastered the Yellow Flash's original jutsu, the Rasengan. Jiraiya was the one who trained the Yellow Flash. After all, it is to be expected that he would want the man's son to follow in his footsteps. The diminutive Tsuchikage had a scowl on his face and was grinding his teeth at what could be the second coming of Konoha's Yellow Flash, the same man that almost single-handedly turned the last war in Konoha's favor, the very same man that killed 1,000 Iowa shinobi in a single battle. Among those casualties was Kitsuchi's late wife. Onoki had heard enough, now he had a choice to make. Good job for bringing this to me. You are dismissed. The Anbu gave a bow to his leader and exited the office, leaving the Tsuchikage to his thoughts. Onoki had already forgotten about his previous tiredness and knew he wouldn't be getting any sleep that night, as he had a lot to consider. Mountain range of Iwagakure. Outside of Iwagakure and just far enough to avoid the village patrols, two men waited. They both wore black cloaks with red clouds and were using conical straw hats. However, one was a hunched figure that you could only see the upper half of his face as his lower half was covered with a piece of cloth. He also had what appeared to be a long, metallic scorpion-like tail that came out of the back of his robe. The other figure was a young blonde man with long hair that he kept in a high ponytail, and had a long bang hanging over his left eye. But the one trait that really drew attention were what appeared to be a mouth in each of his hands. What is taking him so long? I hate to be kept waiting, said the shorter one with a deep hoarse voice. You should really learn some patience, Sasori no Dana. After all, with that body, you have all the time in the world, said the blonde man to his partner with a cheeky grin. Shut up, Deidara. I'm not in the mood to be listening to your prattle, said Sasori with irritation to his partner. So touchy. You know, being so close to home makes me a bit nostalgic. I wouldn't mind leveling a building or two to remind my countrymen of the magnificence of my art, said Deidara while playing with some clay to pass the time. That trash you do with your clay isn't art. Art is everlasting, is something that can be admired for generations to come. And I told you to shut up, repeated Sasori. Your puppets are okay, I guess, but nothing compares to the beauty of the power of an explosion. Hearing people's screams of terror as their houses crumbled down just brings a tear to my eye, said Deidara, waving off Sasori's previous comment. Sasori was about to lash out at Deidara for once again failing to be silent when suddenly the same Anbu that had been with the Tsuchikage just an hour ago arrived in a shunshin body flicker. Took you long enough. How did it go? Asked the puppeteer at the Iwa Anbu. The sleeper agent turned his head at Sasori and stared straight at him through his porcelain mask and responded with a monotone voice. The Tsuchikage seems to have taken the bait. I expect him to mobilize against the Kyuubi soon. How I would have loved to see old man Onoki flipping his shit when he found out about the boy, said Deidara giving a small laugh. Then everything went according to plan. Return to your post, we are done here, Sasori dismissed his sleeper agent and the Anbu went away the same way he had come. Now all that is left to do is wait for the perfect moment. If everything goes well we might just snag as 3 Biju at once, stated Deidara. You can wait by yourself. I'm not staying here doing nothing. I'll come back later when the time to act is right, said Sasori, turning away and walking in the opposite direction. Wait up, Sasori no Dana, we still have to report to Leader Sama. Hey, Sasori no Dana, are you listening to me? Deidara caught up to Sasori and both walked away, intending on returning when all the pieces of their plan had fallen in their place. Kurotsuchi yawned as she made her way to the Tsuchikage's tower. She and her father had been summoned for a mission briefing at first hour in the morning and she was definitely feeling the lack of sleep. She would really like to know what could be so important that her grandfather needed them so early. They were 2 of his finest ninja, so she doubted it was for some trivial task, at least she hoped so. Having to get up at such an hour was bad enough, but having to endure walking with her father so soon after their argument the day before was too damn awkward for her. As they were arriving, she noted more shinobi besides them entering the tower too. She wondered if they had been called for the same thing. Kurotsuchi and her father also entered and went up the stairs, and her suspicions were confirmed when she saw a considerable amount of ninjas gathering outside her grandpa's office. What really caught her attention was that most of them were Junin. There were a few experienced Chunin and a bunch of Tokubetsu Junin, but generally, all of them were highly competent shinobi. What is going on here? Thought the girl, puzzled. While gazing through the large hall she caught sight of a familiar figure, Akatsuchi. Hey Akatsuchi, over here. The tomboy called out to her chubby friend with enthusiasm. Said boy turned around and looked at her with surprise. Kurotsuchi, I didn't know you were here too, responded the young man with his ever-present cheerful face. I just got here, said the girl with a small smile. And speaking about it, do you have any idea of what's this all about? Akatsuchi just shook his head while giving a shrug. No idea really. I got called here so early I didn't even have time to get breakfast. The young prodigy gave a sigh and turned her head to look in contemplation at the rest of the ninja gathered. Same on my end. I wonder what's gotten into the old man. There are too many high-ranked shinobi in here. Akatsuchi frowned in worry. I just hope nothing bad has happened. Kurotsuchi could only agree with him. After a considerable amount of ninja arrived, they were called into the room. When they entered they could barely fit into the Tsuchikage's office even though it was relatively big. After Kurotsuchi managed to find a spot for herself between Akatsuchi and her father, she saw her grandpa floating over his desk with his gravity jutsu. He was wearing his brown Tsuchikage hat with the kanji for Earth, and had a stern and serious face, which only reinforced her suspicion that whatever was happening was something big. Onoki scanned the room, looking briefly at every one of the ninjas present. After confirming everyone's attendance he gave a curt nod to his secretary, who then proceeded to close the door behind her as she left. The small man cleared his throat and went straight to the point. I know you are wondering why I summoned you here. And that is because it has recently come to my attention that Jiraiya of the Sannin has been training the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, and has currently entered the Land of Lightning for reasons still unknown. Most of the shinobi in the room had looks of confusion at the news, not understanding why that information was relevant. But Kitsuchi and a few of the more experienced Junin started to catch up with their leader's intentions. Oh no dad, you wouldn't, thought Kitsuchi, fearing where this was going. The Tsuchikage continued, not caring for their reaction. This leaves Konoha's Biju the most vulnerable it has ever been. Your mission is to track down Jiraiya and his apprentice and retrieve the Jinchuriki. Do what you will with Jiraiya, but the boy has to be brought back alive to extract the Kyuubi. Due to the delicate political nature of this mission, along with Jiraiya's strength and the threat of a Jinchuriki, this mission is classed as S rank. A collective gasp was heard at the details of the task at hand. Having to face a Sanin and a Jinchuriki, while at the same time risking starting an open war with another nation was something to be nervous about, even if it was at Konoha's expense. Kurotsuchi on her part couldn't have a wider grin. Her first S-rank mission. And a chance to take Konoha down a peg or two. She was as ready as she could be. Onoki was just about to wrap up the briefing. You will meet at the village gates in an hour. Aside from all of you, I have recalled some of the Anbu with low priority missions to help you. Their skill is more required at the moment. Kitsuchi will be the commander of this force. If there are no questions, you are all dismissed. Finished the cage and waited for them to either go or voice a concern. Everyone started leaving, except for Kitsuchi, who stayed behind staring at his dad in silence until it was only father and son in the room. Onoki turned to look at his son with a raised eyebrow. It's something the matter, Kitsuchi. Kitsuchi's face turned into a look of incredulity at his father's words. You ask what's the matter? This mission a mistake, that's the matter. You are risking starting a war when after all these years recovering from the third war we are finally at our former strength. And you are risking throwing away all that progress just for a single biju. The small man narrowed his eyes at Kitsuchi's tone. This is a good opportunity for Iwagakure. If we succeed we could become the strongest village in the elemental nations by the mere fact of possessing 3 biju. His son couldn't accept his reasons. I can see that, but the risk is too great, is not worth it. I know you, Dad, I know that there has to be more to it than that. What are you not telling us? Demanded Kitsuchi. The Tsuchikage frowned, deep in thought. Should I tell Kitsuchi? He's smart, I may be able to trust that he won't do anything stupid, concluded the small man. Close the door, he said plainly. His son got curious about his sudden change in attitude, but he complied nonetheless. When they sensed that no one was around anymore and the door was closed, the Tsuchikage started speaking again. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. You can tell no one, not even Kurotsuchi, no, especially Kurotsuchi. Do you understand? The old man looked intently to emphasize his point. Kitsuchi was getting on edge at the odd secrecy, but he nodded in understanding. Onoki closed his eyes and gave a loud sigh. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki is the Yellow Flash's son. Kitsuchi adopted a bewildered look, showing his reluctance to believe it. That can't be. The Yellow Flash's son. Are you totally sure about this? His father nodded and raised his hand. He was holding a picture of a blonde boy. I have received good intel on him, along with this picture. Kitsuchi looked over the photograph and widened his eyes in surprise. He looks exactly like that man. How are we just learning about this? And that's not all. It seems that Jiraiya has been training him in his father's techniques. If we don't act now, in a few more years Konoha might have the next Yellow Flash that also happens to be the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. The Yellow Flash was bad enough. Imagine how the war would have been if that man had had the strongest of biju boosting his already lethal skills, explained the small cage, displeased at remembering their bitter defeat at the hands of that man. Kitsuchi was silent in shock, and suddenly he realized why his father couldn't reveal this in the meeting. We need the boy alive if we are to extract the Kyuubi, and the hate for his father is too great in the hearts of Iwa shinobi. Had they know who the boy was they wouldn't even concern themselves with keeping the Jinchuriki alive. He knew that if Kurotsuchi found out she would go at the Jinchuriki with the only intent to gut the boy and watch him die a slow death. Heck, he didn't know if he himself could resist the temptation to get retribution for his dead wife. That boy was the Yellow Flash's flesh and blood, after all. Making him pay for his pain would be the closest thing he could get to justice. But he would never put his men in danger for something as petty as revenge. It wasn't worth it. I understand what you are saying, Dad. And even though going for the boy would bring some justice for our fallen soldiers, for my wife, I still can't accept risking another war. However, you are the Tsuchikage. If this is really your final say, I can't do anything but comply, said Kitsuchi with finality. Onoki stayed firm nonetheless. not swayed at all by his son's attempt to change his mind. Glad to hear that you at least know your place. Now go, you have a mission to accomplish. Kitsuchi made his way out of his father's office, a look of resignation and disappointment marring his features. There was nothing left to do but to execute his orders to the best of his abilities, for he knew that if he failed, the consequences would be severe. Merchant Island in the Land of Lightning. It had been a few days of traveling from small island to small island looking for information to find yet another island. Naruto was getting tired of going around asking people in all these villages only to find dead ends, and on top of all that, they had to constantly keep a low profile while at it to avoid catching the eye of Kumo ninja. All in all, it was a pretty tedious experience for the orange-clad blonde. He was sitting on a bed in an inn's room that he and Jiraiya rented for the day when he heard the door open and saw his master walk in. You are finally back, Ero Sennin. Did you learn anything of use this time? Asked Naruto, hopeful for any kind of advance. He was so tired of going around in circles. Jiraiya scratched the back of his head nervously, knowing that Naruto wouldn't like what he learned. Well, apparently the island we are looking for is a dangerous place used as a training ground by Kumo. It is crawling with dangerous wildlife, giant hostile animals and the like. It's practically Kumo's version of our forest of death. As expected, Naruto blew up. Say what? How did your precious contacts forget to get that tiny little detail? Their own forest of death was bad enough, and this one was on an isolated island in the middle of a rival ninja nation. That was where they were so eager to get to. His master raised his hands in a placating manner at the outburst. Easy there, brat. I know it may be a bit dangerous, but if it gives us a real shot at controlling more of the Kyuubi's chakra, then is a risk worth taking. Naruto wasn't having any of that. Tough. Not if we are dead. The stupid fox is not worth risking our heads over it. And I don't know about you, but I'm sick of searching blindly for a place that we aren't even sure is gonna help us. I'm done. I'm going back to the land of fire and you can't stop me, finished the young man and started to pack his belongings. Jiraiya finally lost his temper. The pressure from both the imminent danger his student was in for running low on time looking for their last hope was already thinning his patience. Now his student's behavior was the straw that broke the camel's back. The Akatsuki are coming for you, dumbass! Shouted the sage with a fierceness rarely seen in the old pervert, making Naruto stop his rant as he was too stunned by his master's rarely seen temperament. They are coming and you aren't ready. I'm sorry, Naruto. I really tried to put you at a level that would be acceptable to defend yourself against them, but the truth is I failed. You stand no chance against them as you are now. This is our best shot to ensure that you are strong enough when the time comes, and so far I have no better ideas. By the end of his argument, Jiraiya's mood had changed from anger to depressed at finally admitting his failure in preparing Naruto to defend himself. Naruto was speechless at his master's revelation. While he already suspected that he wasn't strong enough to take on an Akatsuki member head-on, he had hoped that at least he could hold his own. But judging by what Jiraiya said, he would be no match at all for any of them. Now he was just as depressed as his old teacher. He felt as if his training had been for nothing. They sulked in silence for a bit until Naruto asked with a sullen voice and his head down. Heard anything else that could help us find it? Jiraiya also waited for a bit before answering. The island is on top of the shell of a giant turtle, that is why it's so hard to find. Let's just go, mumbled Naruto with resignation. And so with their spirits down, they were off to continue their search for the elusive island. Now both of them hoped more than ever that whatever was in there would be able to help them, as it was their last hope for their training trip. Toby once again sat alone in a cavern, going over the current situation in his mind, and so far everything was going according to the plan. The Tsuchikage had sent a large elite force with a lot of his most skilled shinobi in pursuit of the Kyuubi, and among those in the force were most of the Anbu patrols usually guarding the Yonbi and Gobi. Now getting close to the Jinchuriki wouldn't be a problem with the meager defenses left protecting them. All that was left was for Zetsu to confirm when the assault unit went too far past Iwagakure's border that they wouldn't be able to help once the Akatsuki made their move. Speaking of the devil, at that moment the flytrap-like man materialized out of the ground. He turned to Toby, ready to inform his leader of the development of their scheme. The force hunting the Kyuubi is already on the seas of the Land of Lightning giving chase to the Jinchuriki. At this point even if they were to turn around and come back they would not get here in time to save the Yonbi and Gobi, reported Black Zetsu in his deep monotone voice like always. That was what Toby had been waiting for. It was the moment to start making their move. Now is the time. Inform the others to be ready to act. But have them wait for our signal. The attack has to be a coordinated effort if we want to capture both Jinchuriki at the same time. Will do, Toby. They are already on standby. Some of them are restless to start, said White Zetsu with his usual cheery disposition before submerging himself and his black half on the ground after just arriving. Toby stood up, ready to leave too. Even if he wasn't part of the operation he still wanted to see the performance of the Akatsuki members, albeit at a safe distance of course, as it still wasn't the moment to reveal himself to the world. Sea of the Land of Lightning. The cold breeze of the foggy night could be felt on the ship, but Kitsuchi didn't even pay attention to the uncomfortable weather. A lot was at stake on their success to pay any mind to it. The Iwa commander stood motionless on the railing of the wooden ship, showing an air of confidence and authority to help the morale of his troops. For Iwa shinobi like them who were used to always fighting on dry land, the climate conditions were unfavorable. Not only was the environment bothersome, but most of the time they didn't even have land for their earth-based jutsu, and the only times they did was when they passed by the occasional small island. This meant that they were fighting at a slight disadvantage when it came to their jutsu repertoire. Still, even with that handicap, most of them were Junin, and that meant that almost all the shinobi in their unit were proficient in more than one element, and some shinobi like Akatsuchi could expel rocks from their mouth created with chakra. Also, they had members of the Kamizuru clan, and they didn't use a lot of element-based jutsu because their clan techniques were based around manipulating insects, not unlike Konoha's Aburame clan, except that they specialized in the use of bees. And speaking of which, some members of the Kamizuru clan were using their insects to scout the location of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki and the Sannin to ensure that they were still on the right track. With the mist covering their advance, they were safe to get close and get the upper hand with a surprise attack. Their ship should be bigger anyway. They rented a big warship from some mercenaries and the Jinchuriki was traveling in a small fishing ship. They would have the advantage once they started raiding their target. A member of the Kamizuru clan was just receiving some of the bees he had sent out to scout, and after gathering the intel his small summon had brought him he went straight to Kitsuchi. Captain Kitsuchi, we are only half an hour away from our target. If it wasn't for the mist we could have a visual already. Kitsuchi gave out a deep sigh, knowing that a battle would soon break out. He quickly composed himself and called out to his men in authority. All of you, prepare for battle. We will soon reach the Jinchuriki and Jiraiya of the Sannin. If you have anything you need to do to properly equip yourselves, now is the time. Everyone started digging through their ninja tools and grabbed any weapons they may need. Kurotsuchi and Akatsuchi were on the lower deck finishing their preparations. Akatsuchi was nervous about the mission. He had never been against a foe such as Jiraiya, and the prospect of fighting the Sannin wasn't too appealing for the plump boy, so he tried to relieve some tension with small chat. What do you think of this, Kurotsuchi? Aren't you a bit tense, or scared for that matter? The tomboy turned to look at her friend with an excited grin. Scared? Not a chance. This is the biggest mission I have ever gotten, and if we succeed we will deliver a fatal blow to Konoha. Besides, we have a large force of strong shinobi with us. Even just you, me, and Dad would be a force to be reckoned. With these many people here there is no way we can fail. And on top of that, our targets are an old man and an inexperienced Jinchuriki. How hard can it be to beat them with our forces? Said the girl with the confidence she was known for. Even with his friend's reassurance, Akatsuchi didn't feel any less nervous. I hope you are right, Kurotsuchi. The Sannin are supposed to be some of the strongest shinobi in the world. And we are always told to be wary of Jinchuriki regardless of their experience. The girl gave an unconcerned huff. We'll be fine, you worry too much, Akatsuchi, said the girl as she finished strapping her sword to her waist. Akatsuchi decided to drop the subject, knowing that he obviously wasn't convincing his friend about the dangers of the mission. He instead focused on something else that caught his attention. By the way, Kurotsuchi, that's not your usual sword, is it? I have never seen it before, he said, pointing at the sword on her hip. It looked like it had seen some use as the handle was worn out even if it still seemed solid. Kurotsuchi put a gloved hand on the handle and took the weapon out of the scabbard. Oh, this. Yeah, this was my mother's. I had it stored away. I didn't want to use it until I became Junin and was skilled enough to honor her memory, she explained while examining the blade with a tender look as the blade showed the reflection of her pink eyes. Akatsuchi looked at her with a kind look, imagining how much the blade had to mean to the girl. Don't worry about a thing, you are a great kunoichi. I'm sure you will have no problem honoring her memory. Kurotsuchi put away the weapon and coughed in her hand, knowing that she probably showed more vulnerability than she intended. Well, that's enough of that. This is not the time to be getting mushy. Come on, we are just about to engage the Konoha bastards. We can't be down here when that happens, she said as she started going up the stairs to the upper deck. Akatsuchi went after her and soon joined everyone, with his worry returning at remembering the upcoming fight. Naruto shivered at the cold air. He was getting tired of this weather. He hadn't seen so much mist since his fight with Zabuza, and he couldn't say that he had missed it. Ero Sennin, are you sure that the giant turtle was around here? It's cold as hell out here and I can't see a damn thing, said Naruto before sneezing loudly. Jiraiya was leaning on the railing, trying in vain to spot anything around them using the small telescope that he usually used to peep at girls with. You heard the old man that lent us this ship. He said that he saw an immense island around these parts that seems to come and go as it pleases. If that's not an island on a turtle, I don't know what else could explain that. Unless it's a haunted island or something. Naruto bleached at his master's words. Haunted Island. Like with ghosts and stuff. And now that he thought about it, maybe the haunted island would explain the mist and the cold. Now his shivering got even worse, and not because of the bad weather. He started pacing from one side of the deck to the other, looking scared and on guard for anything suspicious. Jiraiya gave an exasperated sigh and turned around to scold Naruto. Would you quit that? You are such a superstitious brat, you know that. He put the telescope away and regarded Naruto with an incredulous look. Ghosts aren't real, Naruto, I was just joking. Seriously, what kind of shinobi gets scared of that? That got the Jinchuriki to stop pacing and tried to act tough in an effort to save face. Scared? Me? Of course I'm not scared, Ero Sennin. Who is scared? Uzumaki Naruto is scared of no ghosts, he finished with a rather unconvincing smile, which only made Jiraiya look at him with a deadpan expression, obviously not believing him at all. Suddenly Naruto perked up. Hey Ero Sennin, look. I can see something. Could it be the island? He said while pointing at the distance. The Sannin got a curious look and glanced over where Naruto was pointing at, and he could indeed see a silhouette through the mist. However, it wasn't big enough to be what they were looking for, but it was still rather big, but that was probably because whatever it was close. Soon the silhouette revealed itself to be a large ship, at least 10 times the size of their own. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes in suspicion at the ship's abrupt appearance. They both stared at it for a moment before they heard the ship's crew yell. Charge! Get those Konoha scum! Suddenly a large squad of Iowa shinobi started raiding Jiraiya and Naruto's ship. Jiraiya widened his eyes in alarm at the unprovoked attack. Oh hell no. Naruto, prepare to fight, this is an ambush, yelled the old master at his pupil. Naruto looked equally as shocked before snapping himself out of it and formed a single hand seal for his favorite technique. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Multiple shadow clone technique. In an instant, their small ship was bursting with copies of Naruto. The doppelgangers charged with a battle cry, clashing with their enemies midair and matching their numbers. Soon Jiraiya joined the fray along with Iwa's strongest members of their unit, and the sea became a battlefield. Iwagakure no Sato. Onoki was restless knowing the delicate mission that he had entrusted his son and granddaughter could put Iwa in a terrible position should it go awry. It made his nerves eat him from the inside. He didn't even care about his stacking paperwork for his mind was so clouded with worry over the success of such a delicate task. He only hoped that Kitsuchi's fears didn't come true. Suddenly one of his chunin entered through his door with urgency. Tsuchikage-sama, there's an emergency, you should come immediately. The young man was so worked up that he didn't care to ask for permission to enter. Onoki jumped in his chair at the intrusion. What's the meaning of this? You better have a good reason for barging into my office in such a manner, said Onoki, angry at the disrespect of his subordinate. Even his leader's foul mood didn't deter the young man from his haste. It's Han and Roshi, sir. Something is wrong with the Jinchuriki. The Tsuchikage got upset upon hearing that. What do you mean about that? Demanded the diminutive man. Onoki followed the chunin to the roof, and he could, in fact, see a great amount of smoke coming from two different locations in the distance, Roshi and Han's cabins. They are battling, they wouldn't be using that much strength otherwise, said the Tsuchikage in worry. For them to be fighting just when he had recalled their Anbu patrols had to mean that someone was waiting for the perfect moment to go for both of them at once. It couldn't be a coincidence, someone planned this. Call all the available shinobi we have, we need to protect the Yanbi and Gobi. I'll be personally going to help Roshi, you and the rest help Han, said the Tsuchikage in a hurry to the young man. Before the man could reply, Onoki noticed two small white clay spiders crawling on both sides of the shinobi and widened his eyes, recognizing that particular jutsu. The small man floated away with his gravity jutsu just as the small arachnids detonated on the chunin he had just been talking to. The resulting explosion was big enough to blow a good part of the roof they were standing on, and the only sign that the young man had been there was a shower of blood and gore. Onoki looked with shock at what just a second ago had been one of his shinobi. Long time no see, old man. Did you miss your old student, called a cloaked figure in the sky, riding what appeared to be a giant white dragon made of clay. If Onoki hadn't been angry before, now it was a certainty. Deidara, I knew it was you, I could recognize your jutsu anywhere. The small man glared at his former pupil. The blonde man grinned mockingly at the old Kage. And here I thought that you would be happier to see me. I was in the neighborhood and decided to take a moment of my time to visit my old home. Everything's looking good over here, you have done a great job of keeping things in check, Onoki. However, this place is missing my touch. But no matter, that's nothing a couple C1 won't fix, Onoki leveled himself with his attacker using his gravity jutsu and took a glance at the attire of his former student. That cloak, so you are a member of Akatsuki now. A little slow on the update, old man. I have been a member for a while now, said Deidara, careful to keep his distance. He knew better than anyone that you shouldn't underestimate Onoki. The Tsuchikage knew about the Akatsuki. They were a mercenary group that always performed splendidly and practically never failed an assignment, and they were incredibly cheap to boot. Onoki himself had used their services several times in the past, as he couldn't argue with the results they delivered. But being under attack by them made him feel like a fool for ever associating with the bastards. The undersized man crossed his arms over his chest and demanded answers from his former soldier. Stop fooling around. What do you and your accomplices hope to gain from this? Why are you targeting our Jinchuriki? Deidara gave a dry laugh at Onoki's questions. Ha, like if I would tell you something like that. But enough chatter, weren't you going to help your precious Biju right now? Come on, don't mind me, you go ahead. Well, that is if you don't care to leave me here while I give Iwa a new makeover, said the blond man while he started molding more explosive clay with the mouths in his hands. The small Tsuchikage's eyes narrowed in barely contained rage at the actions of the man. I always hated your cowardly way of fighting, Deidara. But I never expected you to fall this low. See how much I care. Try to keep up, old timer, And so Deidara gave a sharp flip on his dragon and quickly started circling Iwagakure, all while dropping his bombs on civilians and ninja alike, their screams of terror and agony filling the air. I'll have your head for this, Deidara, yelled a now vivid Onoki, and started giving chase to the mad bomber, maneuvering through mountains and buildings as the self-proclaimed artist continued to bomb the city. Take this, you Ing traitor. Jinten. Genkei Hakuri no Jutsu. Dust release. Detachment of the primitive world technique, a small conical light started forming between the old cage's hands, before expanding in a straight and large beam of light going directly for the terrorist. Deidara halted brusquely the advance of his giant clay dragon, barely dodging the beam. Relief washed over him at avoiding such a deadly jutsu. As the Tsuchikage's former student, he knew that technique destroyed at a molecular level. If he was hit by that, there was no chance of surviving. Damn, that was a close call. Way too close for comfort. I think I really pissed off the old man this time, He didn't plan to stick around for long anyway. He just needed to buy some time for Sasori, Kakuzu and Hidan so they could finish capturing the Yonbi and Gobi. Thanks to the missing patrols usually guarding the Bijus, they were discovered only after they were halfway done with their fights, but they still needed just a small distraction to avoid any risk of anyone getting there in time to save the Jinchuriki or give chase once they got them. And that task had fallen onto Deidara, as he had the best mobility out of all of them, and was also the most slippery. He just needed to keep Onoki and the rest of Iwa busy for a short while. But at least as long as he stayed in the skies, the rest of the Iwa ninja couldn't do anything but defend themselves from his explosives. Onoki knew that Deidara was stalling for his comrades, but he couldn't leave Iwagakure unprotected to the assault of the crazy blonde. If he had to choose to save his village or his Jinchuriki, he would choose his village 1,000 times over. You'll regret ever showing your face here again. The next one won't miss. Deidara clicked his tongue in worry. If he kept running away, he would eventually be caught, so it was time to start defending himself. Don't think you can't take me on so easily, you old bat. Let's see how you like a taste of the greatness of my art, The large dragon turned around and went straight for the old cage. The clay creature started spitting small birds made of clay that started homing on the small man. Deidara also started making exploding birds made of clay, and soon a large flock of the small creatures started swarming Onoki until he couldn't keep dodging for long and few of them managed to reach him. Deidara made a single hand seal and yelled, "Katsu!" causing a large explosion. However, instead of the charred remains of Iwa's beloved leader, what fell was a rain of small pebbles, a rock clone. Where did he go? While looking around for any sign of the Tsuchikage, he caught sight of a bright light coming from down below. He widened his eyes and quickly did a barrel roll, but was just a bit too slow, and the next Jinten beam obliterated the left side of his dragon, along with his arm. The mad bomber started a free fall while yelling bloody murder due to his missing limb, but he quickly got his bearings and made a large bird of clay with his remaining arm holding onto it. He couldn't afford to get to the ground or he would get ganged up on by all the Iwa forces. Screw this. This is long enough, I'm getting out of here. Deidara started gaining altitude for his next and final jutsu, pulling out a small clay statue that had an open mouth and wing-like arms wrapped around it. I'll make you pay for taking my arm, old man. Or rather, your precious village will. I have a special gift just for you. My C3 will make a burning crater out of Iowa because art is an explosion. The Akatsuki member proceeded to drop the statue over the village, and as soon as he did, the statue became huge and extended its arms as it continued its free fall. Onoki looked in horror at the large figure. Fearing for the safety of his people, he used the jinten once more and fired it at the statue, tearing a huge chunk of it. However, the rest of the statue detonated soon after, and the inferno that enveloped the sky could be seen for kilometers. Once the explosion died off, the old Tsuchikage took to the air once more to evaluate the damage done. He managed to trigger the explosion high enough that the radius of it damaged only the taller buildings, but still the shockwave was so strong that most of the surrounding structures got big parts of them blown off, and adding the rest of the C-1 bombs Deidara had been using, there was virtually no building in Iowa that hadn't received some sort of damage. And speaking of the Mad Bomber, there were no signs of him anywhere. Obviously, he used the last jutsu as a distraction to cover his retreat. Onoki's ire was palpable. He had been unable to protect his Jinchuriki, his village, and his people. He continued to watch the damage done when one of his Anbu reached the roof of the building he was floating over. Tsuchikage-sama, we suffered heavy casualties in the center and west side of the village, and we still don't know the status of the Jinchuriki. Your orders, sir? Asked the masked shinobi, anxious for the answer of his leader. Gather all the able shinobi you can find and look for wounded. Forget the Jinchuriki, we must have lost them by now. Attending the injuries of our people is more important at the moment, said the diminutive man in resigned anger, knowing that they lost and the enemy had gotten what they wanted. The hatred in the man's eyes could have chilled to the bone anyone that met his gaze. Akatsuki, I'll paint the streets red with the blood of your members, that I promise you. Sea of the land of lightning. The ocean was littered with the remains of what used to be a fishing boat, and there was the occasional Iowa corpse here and there. Even the warship that Iowa had used was in a poor condition by the ferocity of the skirmish. The only thing keeping the battle even was Jiraiya's prowess and the sheer number of Kyuubi-enhanced clones that Naruto could make, and even then, the two Konoha shinobi were starting to be overwhelmed, having had more than a few close shaves. The situation was so critical that Naruto had been forced into his chakra cloak, which made him sport a bubbling red aura of chakra in the shape of a fox, had his canines and claws elongated, made his hair wilder, his whiskers thicker, and his eyes red and slitted. Kitsuchi was impressed. He knew of Jiraiya's strength, but he never had the chance of fighting the man until now. Not even during the war did the occasion present itself, but he had never expected the Sannin to be this strong. The man had managed to repel almost everything they threw at them, and the sheer amount of shadow clones that the boy could make was insane, but he could notice that both of them wouldn't be able to keep this up for much longer. Even if the Kyuubi Jinchuriki seemed to have almost unlimited chakra, Jiraiya did not. It was only a matter of time until he dried himself out. All of you, keep them on the defensive. They can barely hold on, victory is almost ours. All his troops reorganized themselves and started preparing another round of attacks. Jiraiya noticed their attack pattern and knew what to expect, but he also knew that he and his pupil were in trouble if things kept going at this rate. There was no choice, he would have to use Sage Mode. Not only did Sage Mode improve all his abilities tremendously, but it also let him save his own chakra by using natural energy from the environment. Besides, having Shima and Fukusaku helping him would be a great asset. Naruto, I need you to cover me for a moment. Use more of the Kyuubi's chakra if you can, but I need them off my back. Yelled the Sannin to the feral boy. You got it, Arrow Sennin. Naruto focused for a moment before a second tail of chakra materialized behind him. With the increase of the amount of chakra, Naruto could also feel the increase in the Kyuubi's influence over him. His demeanor became more savage, and after creating a dozen shadow clones they all gave a mighty roar. Due to the Kyuubi's chakra powering them, the clones' battle cries were so powerful that they caused small tidal waves that disoriented the Iwa shinobi. Taking advantage of the chaos they made, the chakra-cloaked copies jumped towards their enemies with red spheres of compressed circulating chakra in their hands. Rasengan. Spiraling sphere, most of the Iwa shinobi managed to dodge the assault, but the few that didn't, met their end in a giant explosion of water that the attack leveled in the collision. The massive attack made the Iwa ninja lose sight of their targets in the mist when they were forced to retreat a great distance to avoid it. They stopped for a moment trying to relocate the two Konoha ninja when out of nowhere a small stream of high-pressure water dismembered some of their ninjas, forcing the Iwa shinobi once again to dodge to avoid being skewered. From the mist emerged Jiraiya, but his appearance had quite a few changes. He was now sporting a goatee, a big warty nose, and webbed hands and feet. And aside from his change of appearance, he had two small old toads on his shoulders, one seemed to be a male and the other a female, and both were wearing small capes fitting for their size. The male toad was green and had a white mop of hair, large eyebrows, and a goatee. And the female toad was a lighter shade of green and had short wavy purple hair. The blonde boy was nowhere to be seen, most likely he fell back to avoid getting in his master's way. I think I got a few of them, Jiraiya-chan, said the male toad, now confirmed to have been the cause of the stream of water. Seriously boy, why are you always summoning us in such annoying places? Salt water is bad for our skin, you know, said the female toad, annoyed at the sage. I'm sorry Fukusaku Oja-san, Shima Obasan. I'm in a bit of a pickle here, I can't fend these guys off and protect Naruto at the same time all by myself, said the sage, somewhat embarrassed at being scolded by the toad, but soon gave the Iwa shinobi all his attention once more. Now you bastards, I'll show you what happens when you mess with the great Jiraiya, boasted the old pervert while making a dramatic pose, which earned him 2 punches to the face, courtesy of his amphibian friends. Don't yell on our ears, you moron, chided the couple in unison. Some of the Iwa shinobi took advantage of the distraction that the Sannin and his summons were making and started charging Jiraiya head-on while doing hand seals for their jutsu. But in the blink of an eye the sage was upon them, wielding in one hand a giant blue ball of chakra like the one the Jinchuriki used moments ago, but this one was several times the size of its user. Cho Odama Rasengan. Ultra big ball spiraling sphere, yelled Jiraiya while bringing down the enormous sphere of condensed chakra on the dozen Iwa shinobi. The cries of agony of the men were soon muffled as their bodies started disintegrating in the giant orb until nothing was left of them. Kurotsuchi was in awe at the raw power that the Sannin was showing, she hadn't expected the man to be this powerful. Kurotsuchi. She was taken out of her stupor by Kitsuchi's call and she turned to look at her dad. When Kitsuchi knew that he had his daughter's full attention he proceeded to relay his order. Take our remaining Anbu and go past Jiraiya without being noticed, use the mist as your cover. I need you to apprehend the Jinchuriki and bring him to us. Once we have him in our grasp we will make a run for it. Jiraiya has revealed his true power, to stay and fight him head-on would be suicide. Our only chance of success is to escape with our target. But be careful, a Biju's chakra is not to be underestimated, even if its user is not that much skilled by himself, that chakra is so strong that it makes the boy a threat, he told the girl with authority. Kurotsuchi looked at her father with determination and nodded. I won't let you down, Dad. She called their remaining squad of Anbu, which was about a dozen, and went into the mist and out of sight, intending on hiding from the powerful sage as they tried to reach their objective. Jiraiya, nevertheless suspected what they were trying to do, but he wasn't about to go looking blindly for Anbu-level shinobi, but he knew a way to easily find them. They are hiding from us. I'm counting on you, Obasan, requested Tashima. The small summon looked at Jiraiya knowingly and nodded. On it, Jiraiya-chan, she stuck out a bizarre-looking tongue. It was long and thick, with warts all over it, and seemed to have a face with small squinted eyes and a wide grin with sharp teeth. The weird creature-like tongue started sniffing the air, and after a moment, Shima detected a couple signatures, but she widened her eyes in surprise at what she was feeling. With haste, she started elongating her tongue in what appeared to be a random direction. Jiraiya, Fukasaku and even the rest of their Iwa enemies got varied looks of surprise at the weird behavior. The appendage tried to wrap itself around something in the mist that no one could see, and the warts in the tongue started to release an acid substance while trying to catch whatever it had sensed. Two figures came rapidly out into the middle of the battlefield after just avoiding being melted in the acidic shower. The figures revealed themselves to be two men. They were wearing black cloaks with red clouds, which gave them away as members of Akatsuki. Jiraiya widened his eyes in worry at the identity of the newcomers, remembering the last time he met them. These two again, so this is why Shima Obasan looked so worried. The situation just took a turn for the worse. One was a very tall man, with gray-blue skin, spiky blue hair, and had what appeared to be gills under his round black eyes. Aside from the standard Akatsuki cloak, he also had a big two-handed sword wrapped in bandages, that at the moment he was resting it against his shoulder while he wielded it one-handed. It seems that we have been found out, Itachi-san. Such a shame really, we were planning on killing whichever side was left standing and take the Jinchuriki for ourselves. Said the man with a grin, exposing his sharp teeth. His partner was a pale-skinned man with jet black hair that he kept in a low ponytail and his bangs framed his face. He was devoid of all expression and he had an air of cold serenity about him. But what really stood out were his blood-red eyes with 3 tomo surrounding each pupil. Careful, Kisame. Now that we have lost the element of surprise, our mission won't be so simple anymore. Said the stoic man to his comrade. Hey, silent killing was more Zabuza's style anyway. I'm more of steamroll through the opposition kind of guy. Said the blue-skinned man, seemingly excited at the prospect of a battle. Meanwhile, Kitsuchi was filled with dread at the turn of events. Not only did they have their hands full with Jiraiya, but now 2 other monsters decided to appear with the apparent intent of killing everyone there save for the Jinchuriki. Jiraiya was the first one to react. He puffed his chest and exhaled a huge quantity of ignited oil. Kaden. Dienden. Fire release. Big flame bullet. The already big flame was made even bigger with both toads using wind jutsu to enhance the flames. The amount of fire starting to quickly cover the area made the Akatsuki members and the Iwa shinobi jump to save themselves from burning alive. Kisame had a wide grin at the intense start to his battle and focused his sights on the Sannin. I guess I'll go for the biggest prey first. He lunged at the sage, but before he could reach his intended target, a large fireball forced both him and Jiraiya to split. Recognizing his partner's jutsu, he turned to Itachi with a puzzled look. What's gotten into you, Itachi-san? That could have hit me, you know. Don't fight Jiraiya in his current state, Kisame. He is filled with natural energy at the moment. If you try to absorb it with Samahata, you could end up dying. Only a sage can withstand the effects of natural energy, explained Itachi impassively. Leave Jiraiya to me, you go after the Kyuubi, he is our number 1 priority. Said Sannin cursed under his breath in annoyance. Had Itachi not intervened, Kisame could have taken himself out. The shark-like man put on a face of disappointment at having to sit out the main brawl. No fair, I always get the boring jobs. But I guess it can't be helped. He sighed before resigning himself to his task. Fine, I'll leave these guys to you then. I hope that the Kyuubi puts a bit of a fight at least. He left so fast that only a blur could be seen when he took off. Both Kitsuchi and Jiraiya looked worriedly in the direction the man had left, knowing that their daughter and godson respectively, were over there. But as they were about to give chase to the swordsman, a large curtain of black flames blocked their path. They looked at the remaining Akatsuki member, knowing that he must have been the cause of such technique. That's the same jutsu he used 3 years ago to escape my Gamaguchi Shibari, Toad Mouth Bind remembered the old sage. At the time, he had been forced to seal those flames away as they didn't seem like they could be put out. What is that? I have never seen a fire like that before. It's even burning on water. Thought Kitsuchi in bewilderment. All the remaining Aiwa shinobi, Itachi, and Jiraiya looked tensely at each other, and in an instant, all three factions started the skirmish once again in an effort to make an opening to go help their respective allies. When Kisame reached Naruto, the boy and his clones were already engaged in a fight with a squad of Anbu and a short-haired Kunoichi. As soon as he arrived, everyone stopped fighting and turned to look at him in surprise. Hello there. I'll be taking the Kyuubi now, but you are free to try to stop me, make it worth my while. The blue-skinned man told them with a predatory gaze. The Anbu looked extremely wary of the former Kiri ninja, while Kurotsuchi didn't know yet what to make of the odd-looking man. In contrast, Naruto seemed ready to tear apart the swordsman. While influenced by the Kyuubi, seeing someone that was part of the organization that made him live in worry of being hunted down was more than enough to make his blood boil. He remembered how easily the swordsman had subdued him 3 years ago, but he sure as hell wasn't going down without a fight. Naruto created even more shadow clones. And along with the ones that were fighting the Anbu a moment ago, they rushed at the monster of Kiri, claws and Rasengan at the ready to tear him to shreds. Kisami's grin got even wider at the boy's aggression. He avoided their swipes with ease and dispelled them with a slash of his own soon after, and all while he parried the Rasengans with his sword, dissipating them as he absorbed the chakra powering them. Kurotsuchi took advantage of the blonde distracting the Akatsuki member and signaled her Anbu to capture the boy. Now's our chance. Go for the Jinchuriki. The shinobi complied and made their way to the chakra-cloaked boy. They split up into two groups. One group jumped into the air, preparing a water-based collaboration jutsu, while the one on the ground posed to strike with their blades to incapacitate their target. Naruto first focused his attention to the Anbu preparing to lunge at him with their swords. He gave a sharp turn of his body, smacking his attackers with his chakra tails, knocking them back as blood flew from their wounds. He then looked up as he heard the remaining Anbu finishing their jutsu. Sweden. Mizorapa. Water release. Water trumpet, yelled the Aiwa shinobi as they launched a large jet of water from their mouths as they descended upon Naruto. The Jinchuriki took a deep breath and gave a loud roar, producing a large shockwave that neutralized the water technique and sent the users flying. He didn't get any respite, however, for as soon as he got rid of the Anbu, Kurotsuchi flanked him and started using her Kekkei Genkai abilities. Yoden. Sekaigyo no Jutsu. Lava release. Quicklime congealing technique, the girl spat a large ball of quicklime from her mouth at the orange-clad genin. Naruto attempted to sidestep the slimy substance, but he wasn't quick enough and one foot got encased in it. He momentarily tried to shake it off, but the quicklime started to harden like concrete at the contact with the water he was standing on, effectively trapping his leg and hindering his movement at having to carry the mass glued to him. Kurotsuchi saw that her Anbu were starting to come back, having finally recovered from the previous attacks. Feeling confident in having a backup, she pulled out her mother's sword and charged Naruto, intending of cutting his tendons to subdue him. But in an instant, Kisame appeared between her and the boy after finally finishing off the clones. He gave a powerful slash with Samahata that she just barely managed to block with her own sword, but still the force of the blow sent her flying and she crashed into the water and sank into the ocean at the brutal throw. The Anbu looked in worry at the quick dispatch of the Tsuchikage's granddaughter. Lady Kurotsuchi. They proceeded to surround the monster of Kiri, ready to get revenge for the girl. Kisame glanced around him in boredom at the Aiwa shinobi. You are annoying. This isn't fun anymore, you are all a bunch of weaklings. He wasn't smiling anymore, all in all, he seemed to be done playing around. After a moment, all the shinobi circling him attacked at the same time, stabbing their blades into the vital organs of the Akatsuki member, which coughed up blood and rolled his eyes into his skull. The Anbu gasped in surprise when the seemingly dead Kisame turned into water as they were holding him in place with their swords. Sweden. Daikoden no Jutsu. Water release. Great shark bullet technique. When they heard the technique, they turned around too late to see a giant shark made out of water approaching them at high speed. They didn't have time to dodge as the giant water creature crushed them all in his jaws with a large chomp. All the Anbu were swallowed by the shark as it dived into the water, taking them along and leaving a stunned Naruto face to face with the Akatsuki member. He took them out as if it was nothing, thought Naruto in horror at the strength of the shark-like man. Now that I finally got rid of these pests, come with me like a good little Jinchuriki. If you resist, you'll just make it harder on yourself. I have orders not to kill you, but no one said anything about maiming," said Kisame, having lost all interest in fighting an unworthy opponent. Naruto stared silently for a moment before recovering his determination. He wasn't gonna give up, even if the situation seemed hopeless. That was his ninja way. He jumped at the swordsman with a battle cry, in an effort to claw his face off. The tall man easily sidestepped every single swing that Naruto threw at him, and faster than the boy could follow, he brought his bandaged sword down on the Jinchuriki's torso. In that single swipe, the sword absorbed all the demonic chakra that Naruto was expelling, leaving him back to his normal appearance, his red cloak completely gone. Naruto gasped and got on one knee, barely able to keep himself standing on the water surface. He always ended up tired when the fox's chakra ran out, but to have him forcefully taken left him completely exhausted. What is the deal with that sword? It took so much of my chakra I can barely move. Nevertheless, Kisame didn't give him a moment to catch his breath. He slashed Naruto one more time, wounding him and making him faint due to chakra exhaustion and the after effects from using the Kyuubi's power. As the boy started to sink into the sea, the man grabbed him by the arm and pulled him up to avoid letting him drown. Yoden. Sekaigyo no Jutsu. Lava release. Quicklime congealing technique. When the former Kiri shinobi sensed the attack coming, he quickly turned around, gave it a chop with Samahata, once again absorbing the energy powering the quicklime jutsu and leaving it useless. He searched for the user of the technique and found the same kunoichi he had dealt with earlier. She looked annoyed at having been tossed so embarrassingly, and took out her own sword and clashed with Samahata, pressing against the man with all her might. "You are out of your league, girlie. But you have spunk, I'll give you that," said the shark man with an amused grin. She clenched her teeth in rage. She hated being underestimated. "Shut up, you piece of shit. You just came here to ruin my mission and kill my comrades. I'll make you pay for that." She tried to hold her ground, but she was being pushed back fast, and the worst part was that Kisame didn't even seem to be putting much effort into it, and all while carrying an unconscious Naruto on the other hand. "That mouth of yours is gonna get you killed, girl. So much confidence without the skill to back it up. You should learn your place," said Kisame with his grin returning, finding pleasure in tearing down Kurotsuchi's ego. Faster than Kurotsuchi could follow, Kisame delivered a hard kick to her stomach, making her stumble and lowering her guard for a moment. The former Kiri shinobi exploited her momentary stunned state to swing his sword into her chest, wounding her and taking a large chunk of her chakra. The tomboy gave a cry of pain and brought a hand to hold her injury, staining her palm in blood. She started having trouble standing because of her chakra exhaustion. With her current reserves, in a few minutes, she wouldn't even be able to keep water walking. She looked to Kisame with dread. She hadn't felt this terrified in a long time. In a single attack, he weakened her enough to have her completely at his mercy. Whatever he threw at her next, she knew she wouldn't be able to avoid it. The man gave another swing of his massive sword with the intent of finishing her off. She lifted her mother's sword to block it, but she knew it was useless. With her current strength, the attack would go through her defense without a problem. However, Before the blade reached her, Kitsuchi rapidly came out of the mist to parry Samahata with a kunai, just barely halting the attack. Soon after, a large golem made of rock pushed Kisame to the side, making him drop Naruto. Akatsuchi appeared from the mist too, dissipating the golem he just used to hit the shark-like man. The plump boy turned to his friend in concern. "Are you okay, Kurotsuchi?" She looked in surprise and relief at her friend and father, not expecting their intervention. She nodded to Akatsuchi, confirming her well-being. The wound wasn't life-threatening at the moment, but it would have to be patched up soon to avoid becoming so. Her father had her eyes peeled in watch for the missing Akatsuki member and quickly grabbed Naruto to keep him from sinking. He took a side glance to her daughter to relay her a new order. "Kurotsuchi, take the boy and go, quickly. The Uchiha and Jiraiya will be here soon. The rest of our forces are keeping them occupied, but they won't last. Akatsuchi and I will try to hold this one for as long as we can," he said while handing her the unconscious Jinchuriki. She took the boy and carried him with uncertainty, not liking the idea of leaving her father and best friend to face such a dangerous opponent by themselves. Suddenly, Kisame came rushing at them, sword at the ready to cleave them off. Akatsuchi created another rock golem and intercepted the blade while Kitsuchi encased his first in stone with a jutsu, preparing himself to join the fight. "Go now, Kurotsuchi," yelled her father in urgency. She didn't waste another moment and took off, not even looking back. She ran through the mist with Naruto on her back. She could barely keep a decent pace with her low chakra and the open wound on her chest, but she continued nonetheless. She kept on looking for any place she could hide and rest. After she had recovered enough, she would go looking for her father and what was left of their unit, but first, she needed time to heal properly. After a while of sprinting, she started to make out a figure in the mist, and after getting closer, she noticed that it was huge. Soon she came to see a large island, larger than any island she had seen until now. It seemed to have a large forest with giant spiky trees that was more than big enough to lose any pursuers. She wondered how she hadn't seen it before. With its sheer size, it should be hard to miss, even with the mist. But right now she didn't care about that. She was glad to have found a place to rest. Itachi was busy looking for his partner as he expertly dodged the jutsu his attackers were sending his way. After his battle with Jiraiya of the Sannin and the Iwa ninja went on for a while, his enemies reached the conclusion that Akatsuki was the main threat to take care about. Fighting Jiraiya was difficult all on its own, but fighting the sage and the Iwa shinobi at the same time was a dangerous business, so he had been forced to flee and attempt to regroup with his partner. When he found Kisame, he was fighting two other Junin from Iwa, and by the looks of it, he was winning. Kisame looked as fresh as ever. Meanwhile, Kitsuchi had a couple gaping wounds on his leg and torso, while Akatsuchi was on all fours barely clinging to the water surface due to a deep, bloody injury on his back. When the blue-skinned man noticed Itachi, he flashed his normal toothy grin, glad to be reunited with his comrade. "There you are, Itachi-san. I was wondering what was taking you so long to catch up. I feared that Jiraiya had gotten the drop on you. We have to hurry. Jiraiya and the rest of the Iwa squad are trying to get us first before they kill each other." "Where is the Kyuubi?" asked Itachi impassively. Even tough he seemed to be in a hurry, he still acted calm and collected. Kisame put on a sheepish look at the question. "Oh well, you see, he kinda managed to get away. Some kunoichi took him and made a run for it. I couldn't follow her while I dealt with these guys." "I see." If Itachi was annoyed, he didn't show it. "We fall back then. Jiraiya and the rest will be here shortly. If the Jinchuriki isn't here, there is no point to keep fighting. Like I'm letting you bastards get away again." Jiraiya and the two toads finally arrived, closely followed by the rest of the Iwa ninja. Shima and Fukasaku were already preparing their next jutsu, Senpo, Gomon. Sage Art. Gomon. After taking a deep breath, Jiraiya and his two summons spat a combined solution of oil, fire and wind, creating a sea of burning toad oil that threatened to boil the two men alive. Kisame quickly made some hand seals and spat a great amount of water from his mouth in an effort to counter Jiraiya's technique. Sweden. Bakusui Shoha. Water release. Exploding water colliding wave, the large amount of water coming from the former Kiri ninja became a gigantic wave as it added the water from the ocean to its already massive volume. The two jutsu clashed with great force, making the sea shift violently as a large quantity of steam rose from the crash. Jiraiya and the Aiwa shinobi waited a moment for the steam to clear. The conflict had lasted so long that the sun was already up and the mist had started to dissipate too. When the view was clear again, they managed to see both Akatsuki members riding two sharks made of water. The creatures were incredibly fast in the ocean water, and in moments the two men vanished into the horizon, leaving Jiraiya and the Aiwa platoon in the middle of the sea. The Sannin and the remaining Aiwa ninjas stared warily at each other, waiting for their battle to resume. But before such a thing could happen, Kitsuchi stepped forward with a limp and started talking to the Toad Sage. The Jinchuriki was lost in the chaos, we don't know where he is. We could keep fighting until we are all dead, but right now is pointless to continue. We are willing to back off if you are. Kitsuchi knew that it wasn't completely true. While they didn't know exactly where the boy was, he knew that he was still in Kurotsuchi's care. But their first priority was finding his daughter and the Jinchuriki. Fighting Jiraiya was too dangerous and would be an unnecessary waste of time. He didn't think they could win against the Sannin either. So all in all, avoiding further confrontation was in their best interests. Jiraiya was enraged at the audacity of asking for a truce when they were the cause of this mess in the first place. You are the ones that attacked us. You are responsible for separating me from my student and gave the Akatsuki the perfect opportunity to attack. So no, you aren't getting off the hook that easily. The livid Sannin looked ready to slaughter them all. Jiraiya-chan, I agree with them, we should focus on finding your pupil instead. Intervened Fukasaku before his summoner started the fight anew. Pa is right, boy, we have no more reason to keep fighting. And besides, finding young Naruto is more important right now. Shima tried to reason, thinking the same thing as her husband. Kitsuchi and his men were tensely waiting for an answer from the Sannin, ready to defend themselves should he not desist. Jiraiya meanwhile was grinding his teeth in ire. He wanted to get payback for all the trouble the Aiwa bastards had caused, but he knew that logically the small toads were right. Finding Naruto was of utmost importance, it had way more priority than getting revenge on his attackers. After a bit of internal conflict, he decided to withdraw. Fine. But don't think this is over. The Hokage will be hearing from this, and she will bring dire consequences to you all. Spat Jiraiya with venom in his voice before vanishing in a body flicker. Kitsuchi and the rest of the remaining shinobi let out a sigh they didn't know they had been holding, relieved at being alive. However, Kitsuchi soon called out with authority once more. No time to rest just yet. We have to find Kurotsuchi and the Jinchuriki before Jiraiya does, so move it. At their commander's order, all the men scrambled to look for the missing girl. But despite looking for hours they couldn't find a thing, they didn't even know where she could have possibly gotten herself into. There was sea as far as the eye could see, so hiding places weren't even nearby. It was as if she and the boy had just disappeared. The first thing Naruto noticed when he woke up was the foliage of the tall trees towering above him with the sunlight coming through them. The second thing he noted was a splitting headache he had and was only made worse with the glare of the sun coming through the leaves. But the third and most important thing he noticed was that he was gagged and bound. He widened his eyes in panic as the events of the day before rushed into his mind. He remembered being attacked by Aiwa and then the Akatsuki showed up, and then he lost consciousness fighting one of them. How he ended up in this place was a mystery to him. He attempted to stand and yell for help from his sensei, but to no avail. He squirmed some more while his groans were muffled by the rag in his mouth when he noticed a girl coming into the clearing. He recognized her. She was one of the Iowa bastards that got him into this mess. The pink-eyed girl grimaced when she saw that Naruto had woken up. She had left him alone after she woke up still feeling sore from her wound and left for a moment to patch herself up with some bandages she had sealed on a scroll, and to look for food and water. She had discarded her ruined flak jacket and one could see the bandages through the blood-stained hole on her red uniform. So, you are finally awake, Konoha scum. She continued to approach him until she was right beside him and crouched to get a better look at him. She wanted to torment the boy for the trouble they went to capture him since a lot of her comrades died for the mission. You really were a handful to catch, you can thank your master for that. But now that we got you, we can take you back to Iowa and give the Kyuubi to someone worthier of that power. She could see the rage in his eyes as he started shouting at her, or at least trying to. She put a hand close to her ear in mockery at the attempt of her captive. What was that? Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Naruto got even angrier at being ridiculed, but even using all his strength he couldn't break free from his binds. Suddenly, his stomach growled, which caught both of their attention, and he got embarrassed at showing any further vulnerability to his enemy. She put on a condescending grin at his predicament. Oh, you hungry, Konoha dog? Well, you are in luck. I found a river a little while ago and left some traps to catch a fish or two, also I brought some water. She said while pulling a canteen from her pouch and started gulping the contents down. Naruto stared at her with a craving look. He was pretty thirsty too. He hadn't had anything to drink or eat in almost a day. Kurotsuchi noticed the look that the young Jinchuriki was giving her, and after giving a satisfied sigh at her quenched thirst, she regarded him once more. Sorry, how inconsiderate of me. Here, have some. She then proceeded to spill the liquid on the blonde's face, making him close his eyes and groan in protest. Oops, Butterfingers. You didn't even drop it, you bitch. Thought Naruto, hoping that somehow his glare would cause her to drop dead. Ah, such a shame, it's empty now, so I guess you are out of luck. Said Kurotsuchi with fake remorse, before returning to her more cheerful attitude. Oh well, nothing to be done about it. I heard that Jinchuriki can survive for a while longer than most people thanks to their tenants, so I'm sure you'll be alright. Now that I think about it, I guess there is no need to feed you after all. She then went to the edge of the clearing, just about to re-enter the forest, and glanced at Naruto one last time. I'm gonna see if I caught anything to eat. Don't go anywhere while I'm gone. She mocked him one last time and departed, leaving Naruto fuming and